Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Live with Liz. Here I am once again. Today we're talking about whether law firms need ISO certification. I mean, really. This question, I hadn't just thought of it out of the blue the other day, but when I was in-house, and for those of you who don't know, for the better part of a decade, I worked in corporate legal departments, hiring outside counsel and working with outside counsel around the world. We conducted RFPs. We worked with a lot of different firms. So the perspective is pretty broad. We got a big slice of what happens around the world with business law firms. And hey, good morning, Mariana. Nice to see you here. The ISO certification never crossed my mind when I was in-house. It wasn't something that was a deciding factor of whether a firm would get hired. Now, I'm dating myself, so this was some time ago. It was about 15 years ago. And good morning, Leah. And there was a point when I had a meeting with potential outside counsel, and they were from Asia, and they said, but we have ISO certification. And I thought, so what does that matter to us? What does the standardization mean for a corporation? It didn't matter to me. And all I could think was, wasn't that for manufacturing and construction? And thinking back to my university days, what does ISO certification have to do with law firms at all? And what difference does it make to the service that was going to be provided to us as a corporate client? And it just kind of, it was extra. And it was kind of like, well, that's not a make it or break it issue. And they detailed the process they went through to get it. So what do law firms have to do to become ISO certified? So there's a standard, an ISO standard that is specific or relevant for law firms. It's 27001. And it really relates to cybersecurity and information security. And this is the impetus for law firms getting it. And it's a driving force. And now something that appears to be highly recommended, even for firms that you wouldn't even think it would be necessary to consider it. So after doing some research on this, I think it's important to at least understand what it is, how it helps firms, and the value that it can provide. But it's not for the faint of heart, because as your firm gets bigger, it becomes a more complex process to actually achieve ISO certification. And it does require a certain amount of resources that you have to be willing to commit to actually getting this certification. It's a process. It starts with you figuring out what your status quo is, analyzing everything, knowing people, process, tech, all of your data, where it lives, how information is treated, and it comes from beginning to end. This is going to end up being maybe even how you discover your one true source of information for your firm. It will definitely, going through the process, open your eyes to what your firm's risks might be. It will definitely, going through this process, be beneficial in terms of understanding what you have, where it is, and those things are super important for all of your clients. I think to the Panama Papers and the scandal it causes, just for a law firm to not have security of information in place and be able to prove these steps. And I think if this were in place, how could something like that ever happen? So the value can be immense if it's protecting your firm and your firm's reputation and information. And taking it a step further, the value could be even more, because nowadays it can be much more of a selling point. Had I understood back when I was in-house what they meant by ISO certification for the law firm and what that meant in terms of the value to me as a corporate client, I certainly would have looked at it differently. Now, once you go through that analysis, you're not finished there. That process continues. You have to review all of your information. You have to go through various steps on your process to figure out what needs to be implemented to your process and in your firm to meet the standards required under ISO 27001. They're specific. They can be time consuming. And like I said, can consume a vast amount of resources at your firm to make it happen. But it may actually be something quite worthwhile to actually go through. And once you go through that process of getting those standards and measures implemented in your firm, you're still not finished. You still don't have just magical ISO certification. You have to go through testing. You have to look for the weaknesses. They call it penetration testing. Oh, my dirty mind. And then you have to And also there are third parties that can help you with this. Actually, there are third parties that can help you from beginning to end. Firm Forward is not one of them. We do not do this, at least not today. Maybe one day in the future we'll look further into that. But right now, there are other third parties that can help you with your auditing process, which has to be done before you can be reviewed for certification. And so once you have everything implemented and you've done this penetration testing, you've done the auditing, and you get through that process, then it goes to the review for certification. And then you get certification and you have to maintain it. So it's kind of this 6-step process, and you have to really be committed to it. But even if you're not, even if you just get that first portion of it underway, you'll still find value for your firm. I truly believe, after looking at everything anew, and seeing this trend kind of grow over the last few years. And there was an article on law.com. It was written by Sue Pellegrino of, let's just get the name right, Everest Discovery. And she also recommends this. And in the article, it is recommended that law firms go through this process. And going through the explanations provided in this article was pretty helpful and insightful to making this case and to understanding why it can be crucial for a law firm, especially if you're B2B, especially if you're dealing with corporate. But even if you're not, even if you're B2C, it absolutely makes sense to have some sort of a standard in place, even if you don't achieve ISO certification, going through the steps of this process to at least have some sort of control in place over the security of information at your firm. There are firms out there doing this for their clients and not doing this for themselves. So it absolutely makes sense that a firm would go through the process, even if you end up ultimately not being able to maintain ISO certification. Now, all of that being said, if I go back to that in-house idea and what it really looks like, I think it's important to be able to communicate what this means to a corporate client, because you don't want someone who, like me 15 years ago, was sitting there saying, who cares? I don't care if you have ISO certification. You want it to be meaningful to your client, and then you can use it as a BD tool, and you have to make sure that your client understands that. Now, in the later years, participating in responses to RFPs and seeing RFPs from many different places around the world, I want to say I've never seen the request or an inquiry about your ISO certification status in an RFP, but that's not true. It's true in the United States. I've never seen an RFP in the US inquire specifically about ISO certification as a qualification to be included as, approved counsel on approved counsel lists, or to be selected as outside counsel as part of an RFP process. I've never seen it in the US. Now, maybe it exists and I just haven't seen it, but I have seen it from Asia. And I think this is interesting, because if you're looking to be competitive and maybe you're a US-based firm or a firm that never considered this before, this could be something beneficial that sets you apart. Like I said, once you get that ISO certification, even if it's ticking a box in an RFP response, you absolutely need to be able to articulate the benefit of that to the client and why that security matters. Now, today, people are more knowledgeable about why it matters. People are more aware of information security risks, of the breaches, of what can possibly happen. You see it especially in the financial sector, but you also see it in data privacy all over the place. So it may not just be limited to financial, but technology in general. And this affects basically every industry out there. So if you can connect on that level and express the value of that ISO certification and the value of the commitment that you've made to your clients by going through this process, then certainly it can set you apart and set you up to be selected as outside counsel, or to be chosen for inclusion on an approved counsel list. And those things can absolutely lead to more business. And of course, we can't underscore enough how much it just protects your firm to have security in place and to avoid security breaches to begin with, because the cost to a firm of having a security breach, maybe not just the real cost of that one instance, but your reputational cost and the loss of business. That's definitely enough to at least go through the process, to at least begin and take a look at it. And for standardizations in general, that bewilderment that I experience doesn't have to be something that your clients experience. That communication element of it can absolutely be included in some of the materials that you provide. And I think it's something that I will actually start looking for now that I am more aware of what this means for a firm and how a firm can actually get business out of having ISO certification. Now, there are people out there that have said this is not for every firm. And I've certainly seen in some of my research recommendations that not all firms should do this, that it's too burdensome, and that it's okay if you don't. And part of me agrees with that too. I still think that in that recommendation, those firms, I do still believe, should at least go through some of the process though. And maybe not the official formal process for ISO certification, but certainly the process of determining where everything lives and how they protect it, what steps they take. And if it's creating a chart, if it's having some sort of diagram that, explains where everything is for the partners of your firm to understand and not just the IT department. And that's another thing that maybe this process can bring to light, is this communication between IT and the rest of the firm. And maybe even bringing IT into, instead of just being that cost center, something that can help with explaining what these things mean for your clients as well. So taken as a whole, do we recommend ISO certification? We recommend at least looking at the process and the beginning of it. We certainly recommend ISO certification for the firms that can put the resources into it, and for the firms looking to work on corporate work and internationally. Certainly ISO certification has value and can have extraordinary value. And that in my young naivety, when I was on the corporate side of the house, I just didn't understand. And that's something that can be avoided if we can just explain the value and why it matters so much. And I think efforts like this can certainly make the difference between whether or not your firm gets a major client or not, or is not even in consideration. So maybe there are firms out there who are partner firms or corporates out there who would say, this is a fine line for me. And ISO certification is what I'm going to use as maybe not the ultimate deciding factor, but something that's going to set apart firms for me. If a firm has gone through this effort and I know that my information is going to be protected and I can trust the firm, and I'm building that accountability with the firm, that they've gone through something and that they have that commitment that it takes to represent a corporate client like me, of course, that's going to make the difference. So if you're thinking about ISO certification, go for it. Go ahead and start and see what happens. And I would love to hear about your experiences with ISO certification, whether you've considered it, whether you've actually done it, how burdensome it really was. I have had that process explained a few times from different law firms, but I'm not really sure what today that means, how burdensome it might be. Maybe it's a lot easier today than it used to be, with all of these third parties willing to help, tools that are available to make things easier, especially when it comes to your analysis, assessment, and auditing those procedures. So yeah, I definitely want to hear more about your ISO certification journey. And if you need assistance in figuring out how to communicate that to your clients, that part we can help you with. If you have questions about business development and legal marketing, feel free to reach out to us at solutions@firmforward.com. We are always open to one-off questions, and we'll try to get to everyone in a timely fashion. And if you missed it, I will be in Miami November 14th to November 17th. If you happen to be in the area, I'd love to meet with you there. And then I will be attending the Inter-American IP Association annual meeting in Medellin in December 1st through the 8th. And if you happen to be in Colombia, I would be happy to meet you there. Take care, everybody. See you next time on Live with Liz.